Hello internet people and welcome back to the channel. Today is another no notes rant kind of day and I want to talk about Gen Z for a moment. I probably don't have a bunch of Gen Z subscribers or folks who watch my channel, but I wanted to talk to you guys today because it's about to be your time to shine. So this video is really kind of encouragement for Gen Z and a warning to Gen X that your time is almost finished. And let me talk about why. Taking apart the recent report on employment by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it looks like we have a really important warning sign when it comes to employment, and that is the continuing unemployment claims. Those continuing claims are reaching a level that we have not seen since the end of 2021. Generally, when we see those continuing claims start to rise like that, the rest of the employment picture follows by a decline in employment and layoffs. Now, I don't know 100%, of course, if that's going to happen. No one really does. But let's talk about what that means for Gen X and why this provides opportunity for Gen Z. We are going through a massive change in the world of business, in the world of technology, that looks a lot like the blue-collar apocalypse that happened back in the 1970s and 80s, where manufacturing changed so much people weren't able to compete and jobs disappeared or they simply changed. The economy just went through a large change and many people weren't prepared for it. That's happening right now. Now, I think I've told a story like this, or I told this exact story on YouTube before during a live stream, but I've seen this happen before with boomers, where there's going to be large layoffs that are going to be concentrated in a group of people in their 50s. And this group of folks is never going to find employment at the same level of income ever again. You have to accept that. Now, working as a financial advisor over the last 20 years or so, I want to talk about particularly the period between 2008 and 2011, where I had about 15 of my clients who were mid-level executives or project managers who were making, 100, back then salaries were of course lower, but they were making between 150,000 and 225,000 a year. They were super comfortable in their position in their early 50s, making a lot of money. They had mortgages, they had kids in college, they had retirement plans. They had a retirement mapped out where, hey, I'm going to retire in 5-10 years. This is the way my life is going to be. And for all of those people, except for one, it didn't work out. And let me talk about the one guy where it did work out. He was a mid-level executive for Johnson & Johnson. Made about $200,000 a year. His bonus was somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 a year. Let's say he averaged about $250,000 a year. I think he was 52 or 53 when he was laid off. And he immediately came to see me. Said, hey, I got laid off. My resume's already out there, but I kind of know the score. There's a lot of age discrimination out there. I'm going to be replaced with someone 10, 15 years younger that they can get, 20 years of work out of if necessary. What do I do now? And we started talking about his options. And despite the fact that he had a ton of money in his retirement accounts, he didn't have a lot of after-tax money out there. So not a lot of money that he could dump into a business of his own and create his own job without paying enormous penalties in terms of taking money out of his retirement accounts. So he kind of did the bravest thing that I've ever seen someone do like that. He tossed away his idea of class, tossed away his idea of what is valuable work, and he went out and he bought the cheapest sort of franchise that he and his wife could both do, meaning they both had the skill set to do it, because he realized after we sat down and we talked that outside of being an executive, he didn't have a ton of job skills. Lots of people have management skills. Lots of people have project management skills. And there's going to be tons of younger people coming into the workforce who are going to be able to fill that role at basically half the price where he was. So he's never going to make the kind of income again that he was making before at Johnson & Johnson. This guy did the bravest thing I've ever seen someone do at his age. He went out and he bought a franchise in a company called The Maids. And within a week of him buying that franchise, I think he only paid like $35,000 or $40,000 for it. Within a week, he and his wife were out cleaning houses. And they came up with a plan to do a really good job, to hire the best people. And he built that business from just him and his wife until 6 years later, he ends up selling that franchise for, I know it was more than $500,000. I don't remember exactly how much it was, but we parlayed that into retirement for him. He was able to retire on that after using the income from the franchise to sort of get rid of his debt, pay off his mortgage, get his kids through college, and all that stuff. All of those other folks, say somewhere between 15 and 20, who were high income folks who lost their jobs, they were no longer my clients after 2 or 3 years. They ended up burning through their entire savings, all of their retirement accounts, trying to maintain the lifestyle they had, holding on in hopes that they were going to get a job that replaced their income. A lot of these folks turned down good jobs because they would have to take a 30 or 40% pay cut, and that was going to impact their lifestyle. They told me they just couldn't afford to live on, $150,000 a year, whereas before they were making, $210,000 a year before that. I think that their entire retirement was destroyed by not realizing that things had fundamentally changed, that the only thing that you can guarantee that's going to change in life is essentially everything, right? That's the only constant in life, is that everything changes, right? That's always going to be true. I think we're heading towards that era right now. When I looked at the demographics for who is claiming continued employment, it's pushing higher and higher in the age range. And I think the Gen X is actually going to get hosed in this series of layoffs. It's Gen X right now who are mostly those high-paid employees who are in middle management positions that are most vulnerable for a layoff. If you think you're safe, you're not safe. If you don't have any savings, I would consider getting as much savings as you possibly can at this point and starting to cut back your lifestyle now. These layoffs are coming simply because the economy is cyclical. It's been a very long time since we've had a real recession that was based on just the end of a credit cycle. I've kind of been talking about this for years and it hasn't really happened. Yes, I've been wrong about the timing on this before. It genuinely looks like it's happening right now. Part of this is aided by, of course, government policy. I'm not in favor of the tariff regime. If you've taken a look at beef prices right now, you know that there absolutely is inflation still, despite the fact that a lot of that is because of how the numbers are calculated. They exclude fuel and food prices. Food prices are going through the roof right now, and it's not just because of supply shock like it was before. It's because of the tariffs. We get a lot of our beef from Brazil. There's a 25% tariff on that right now. Mexico has just set minimum export prices for tomatoes, which were higher than they were in the past, which means that now there's no incentive for farmers in the United States to lower prices on tomatoes. They're probably going to follow with other produce. So we're going through a period of inflation. We're going to see rising unemployment. I don't know if we're going to fall into a recession that's so deep that we see 8 or 10% unemployment, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see 6% unemployment by this time next year. That's going to mean a slowdown in the economy. Generally, to fight inflation, the way you do that is to reduce demand by reducing employment. The blunt tool to do that has been interest rates in the past. You raise interest rates, make it more expensive to borrow, people stop hiring, demand slows down, the supply chain is able to catch up to demand, and we don't have those supply shocks because demand is lower. This time around, we probably didn't raise interest rates high enough to crush demand. There was no one willing to take the political risk to cause that level of unemployment. And the way we've elected to do this this time around is with the imposition of tariffs, which I think ultimately is going to be bad for the global economy, not just a readjustment of inflation here in the United States. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to this. I really think that the American populace has basically just become wimps in the last 40 years when it comes to dealing with economic hardship. We aren't prepared because we don't think far enough ahead. We don't keep enough money in savings, and we're obsessed with consumption. I'm, of course, the exception to this rule. I live in Southern California. My monthly budget is under $4,000 a month, all right? And that is entirely by design. I don't get any joy out of buying things. But lots of people in this world, that is your chief joy. You don't have any hobbies. You don't really have any ambitions other than to buy things and then go enjoy the things that you bought for a half an hour before you lose interest in them. This is kind of going to be the layer of decision making that causes a lot of crisis here in the next couple of years because of reduced employment. When everything turns around, because it will, your experience as a Gen X person is not going to matter. You are going to be replaced by a Gen Z person. Let's talk about the two big areas where you earn money today: white collar work and the trades. If you're 50 years old, you're in the trades, you're very experienced, you're making $100,000 to $150,000 a year, maybe even $200,000 a year as a foreman or something like that. When you're let go during this slowdown, you're going to be replaced by younger workers who are more energetic, who can be trained to accomplish more than you can. Your experience just doesn't matter as much as you think it does. I know this because I've seen this pattern repeated over and over in the past. Like, I was working in finance during the 2000 to 2001 crash. I was working in finance during the 2008 crash and the recession that really lasted till like 2011. Okay, on paper, it was over by January of 2009, but employment didn't really cover till like 2011 or 2012. And when it did recover, the character of that employment was completely different. In that respect, this recovery is not going to be any different than that. The employment picture is going to look radically different. A couple of different things. If you're in the trades at 50 years old, you're too old and too tired to keep up with those younger workers. Your experience matters, but not as much as you think it does. If you're in your 50s and you're in the technology space, anything that deals with technology, I think even the opportunities are going to pass up the millennials to some degree, and it's going to be Gen Z's time to shine, because a lot of the higher paid Gen X employees are going to be pushed out. A lot of the slightly younger millennial employees are not going to have the native skills in AI that you have. And that's going to put you ahead in terms of employment. So if you're a Gen Z person who recently graduated from university, you're having a hard time finding a job, I promise you that it's going to get better, because you are going to be more qualified for the jobs of the future than the people that you're competing with right now who are 10 years older than you and have experience. Experience in the next 2 or 3 years, because of how much white collar unemployment is changing, is really just going to mean that you're set in your ways. Think about the way I use a phone versus the way my kids use a phone. I basically use my phone to text. I have a couple of apps that I'm forced to use on there, but I'm not out there exploring the capabilities of my phone. I can't use it as natively as my kids can, just because I'm not interested in going through and learning all that crap anymore. But Gen Z is going to be the native users of this technology. They're going to more seamlessly integrate into the new economy that emerges out of this latest crisis. And that's one of the things I always say about a crisis, is that we never go back to the way things were before. We always create a new normal. This is one of the problems I have with the folks who are in charge of crafting economic policy right now, is that they really want to revive the manufacturing economy that we had in the 1970s. That is never going to happen. We will revive a manufacturing economy. It's going to look radically different than it did in the 1970s because of automation. There's going to be fewer jobs there. Most of them aren't going to be as blue collar as you think. And a lot of them are going to be technology related and automated. And I made this point in a video, my last video, that I think the best example of this is the Neo factory that was just completed, I think, a year and a half ago. They're making 400,000 vehicles in that factory. They only have 600 full-time employees, and most of those are maintaining automated equipment. So anyway, I don't know if this was encouragement or not. This was just kind of a long rant on the future of the economy, the period of unemployment that I think is coming in the next 2 years probably. I think by this time next year, we'll have 6% unemployment. At year 2, I think we start to see really strong employment numbers. I think that employment demographic has shifted lower, and I think the income shifts lower as well. And I think this is going to be your opportunity to shine, Gen Z. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.